Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity Podcast, where I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business community. Past guests include Max McGolan, a business banking relationship manager with KeyBank, who explains the ins and outs of business lending, and Gina Kotner, the CEO of an executive assistant agency who has figured out how to run her business in just 10 hours a week. So if either of those sound interesting to you, please go and check out those past episodes. Okay, I was introduced to today's guest through a podcast search.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Yes. In our intake form, it was like, how do you know each other? And then I was trying to think about it. I was like, I know how. I searched a podcast. So I actually started listening to the BizChix podcast before I started my business in 2017. So Natalie Eckdahl owns BizChix Inc., which provides training, mentoring, and coaching to help marketers, consultants, and financial professionals move from multi-5 figures in revenue to multi-6 figures in revenue. Her clients find her through the BizChix podcast, which she has hosted since 2014. Natalie is obsessed with helping women entrepreneurs build an enduring business that is enjoyable, profitable, and sustainable. She loves spending time with her husband, adult daughter, and 2 boys who are in elementary and middle school, and especially with her flock of chickens. Natalie, I'm honored to have you on my podcast.
This is exciting. I am so thrilled to be here, and congratulations on launching your podcast. And I've enjoyed watching your YouTube channel and referred it to clients. So it's really fun to see you in my favorite platform or format, podcasting.
Well, you absolutely have inspired me. And I kind of thought I could never, ever do that. And then here we are. But I really did. I was listening to your podcast, BizChix, before I started my business. So thank you, because I think, I owe like so many amazing connections to the community that you built. And I've mentioned it with a bunch of people who've been on this podcast before. I mean, Julie Fry and Nikki Roush and Louise Brogan. I mean, I keep mentioning, you keep coming up in the podcast over and over. So I was like,
Thank you.
Well, we have to have you on. But I'd love to hear, just get us started with, how you came about with starting your own business.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. We could have a very long answer, but I'll bring you through the short story of it. I've talked about this on my podcast. My first business was in high school. I created a private swimming a business. And so I would teach little kids how to swim in their own pools. So in Southern California, many people have a pool in their backyard. And my mom was my salesperson. I didn't know that at the time, but I now know. She was my fractional salesperson. She would get me clients. And I didn't realize how much I learned from that business until this business. And it's one of my favorite things I've ever done is teaching kids to swim, because they come to you, they don't know how to swim. If they fell in a pool, they would drown. They would leave me being safe. And I would be like, that one is going to be okay. So it was so fulfilling. And the only thing I've ever done in my life that compares to that is the work I'm doing now, because it's so fulfilling as well, getting to help women create profitable businesses and provide for their families. And so I'm thankful to have found the place I'm in now. How I got here is my husband and I had started our own business, a software as a service company. And this was in 2010. And I was looking for ideas for marketing and looking for ideas on how to grow this business. And I found podcasts. And this is when there were it's hard to even imagine now, but I would search for like women entrepreneurs or women in business, and there would be like no podcasts. Nothing would come up.
That's
or a
wild.
woman being interviewed somewhere would come up.
Yeah.
And so in 2013, I got inspired to start thinking about this podcast. And I got the name BizChix. It just came to me one night while we were sitting on the sofa. I was like, okay, I have a name and the URL is available. I'm going to get it. And I took a podcasting course and I launched my podcast, not really knowing what business would come out of it, but thinking I would get paid through sponsorship. So I would keep staying in our current business and build this. And then this would be a second business, and I would make money through sponsorship. So I learned the opposite of the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I learned if you build it, they may not come. So I followed the model of my mentor. And as I've learned, his model really only worked in the time and space he was in, and hasn't really worked for many other people since. So that was also a great lesson, that there were people teaching things that may not be replicable, which I have learned those hard lessons along the way in my business. And also some things that are being taught that I could do things differently and be as successful or even more successful. So I've learned through the school of hard knocks in this business, and tried to pass that on to the women I work with. So yeah, that's how I got here. And through this podcast, my whole world has grown. I didn't know people in other countries. I didn't know, I feel like I can at this point go to almost anywhere in the world and connect with someone I have talked to before or have worked with before. So podcasting has created a world and a community and connections that I could never have found otherwise, I don't think. So I love podcasting. I love other podcasters. And I love that it gave me the opportunity to meet so many amazing people.
Yeah. And you've been doing it like since 2014. So
Yes.
You're coming up on a decade of
I know.
podcasting.
I joke I'm like a grandma on podcasting, because and I have the longest standing podcast for women entrepreneurs. There were about 3 of us that started around the same time, in end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And I can say I have the longest standing podcast. I've been doing the same thing. I've niched over time. I've changed, how I podcast and who I am talking to in the audience. It started very broad initially, and keeps narrowing over time. So that's been really interesting.
So can you tell me a little bit about how the podcast first really started making money then? Was it people listening, like reaching out to you and be like, hey, can you help me? Or did you have some kind of offer to start on how you were going to serve people?
Great question. In 2014, I just thought I would just podcast and people would come, and that was all I needed to do. So I was just focusing on content creation. And I was also pregnant with my 3rd child. So I had about 6 months to get this going, because he was due, he arrived September 2nd. And I started, my first episodes released January 31st of that year. And I realized that as the year came to a close and I was on maternity leave with him, that I had made $0. And I'm a person that doesn't enjoy making nothing. I like money. I like saving it. I like accumulating it. I like sharing it. And I thought, and I'm so used to being successful at what I do. I have a way of operating that usually and part of it's what I choose to do. But usually what I choose to do, I am able to figure out how to be successful at it rather quickly. And so I looked at my life and I thought, you know what, if I can't make some money doing this is taking too much time out of my life. I need to do something different. I should mention that I started off releasing 5 episodes a week initially.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I went down, I did that for about 100 episodes, maybe 150. And then I went down to 3. And then I think in the next year I moved to 2, and then eventually to my cadence of 1 a week, which is what I have now.
Right.
So I had been part of a peer mastermind that year. And I thought, this is something I can do. I know how to facilitate things. I have some training in that. And I knew people were in paid masterminds, and I knew that I had enough listeners. I probably could launch a mastermind. And I decided if it wasn't successful, I was going to quit the whole thing. And thankfully, 5 women signed up and paid me at the end of 2014. And that is honestly the reason I am still here today. Because if it hadn't have found a way to monetize that, it just wasn't going to work. So that's how I first made money, was by offering masterminds, and then people reaching out to me after that for coaching. The first few people that I coached with said, I remember I got an email from a listener and she's like, Natalie, I would love to coach with you. it's really hard to figure out how to do that because it wasn't on my website. It wasn't easy. Nothing was easy to get in touch with me. And so people along the way have given me hints and tips, my listeners, and that has helped me grow this business. And so I initially started out with hosting masterminds for women entrepreneurs and one-on-one coaching. That's how that was how this monetized initially.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's a trend away from paid masterminds right now? I'm not hearing about them as much as maybe 5 to 7 years ago.
I I hear, I think that there's a trend of people offering things that don't get results.
Mm,
I think that there was a time where people were offering, they might say mastermind, but it may not actually be what a mastermind is purely. It might be a group coaching program. It might even be a course that someone's calling a mastermind. There was a several years where the languaging was confusing to most people, and it wasn't clear exactly what you were getting or if it was going to be create what you were wanting it to create. So I think it's really challenging because the coaching industry is not regulated at
yeah.
all. And so often what you see are people, this is what I think people need to be careful of, is working with someone who has had success in one realm, one time, and then starts coaching on that thing. And really hasn't helped many, like a group of people, create that same success. So, or what they're teaching worked 10 years ago and no longer works. So I think there's a lot of skepticism. And I get that when I am not people's first coach. And so I often have to overcome, uh, people have lost trust or felt they've lost significant amounts of money. It's challenging, and it's challenging from my perspective, being a person that strives to be ethical in what they're offering and doing. So I actually just did an episode on that, how to trust again,
Yeah.
if you've been burned by a coach, because the last round of my group coaching program that I brought people into, like over half the people that came in were so hesitant. They're like, I trust you from your podcast. I think you can help me, but I also have this like experience that is causing me huge hesitation. In terms of paid masterminds in general, I don't know because I don't really study that. So I can't say if I know they're still out there, and I know people still do them. I have one in my business that I'm offering for women that are beyond my group coaching program. But yeah, I think that there's that have invested before they're asking better questions, which is good. That's good for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think I see that across all sorts of industries, not just coaching.
100%.
I mean, we oftentimes in our CFO practice, like, a lot of times people have hired a CFO before, and then they go, oh, well, that person didn't really deliver what they said they were going to deliver, or they were never responsive, or, kind of all the things. So they are hesitant. But I think what that does do is hopefully, if you have made an investment like that like it wasn't what you wanted it to be, hopefully we're learning from that and why it wasn't. And maybe thinking, okay, if I'm going to hire again, what questions do I need to ask?
Yes.
And what do I need to look for? So you're giving us some really practical tips of like, okay, it's not just if you are looking to hire a coach, I think is there a track record of success, not just a one-time thing. Yeah,
Yes.
maybe one successful business, but you don't know all the other factors that maybe contributed to that success. And just because they had one thing do well one time, you can get lucky sometimes.
You can. People can. I get really frustrated with many of the Facebook ads I see, especially if I know some of the success stories or testimonials or background, because I've been around in this online space for so long that it's the same group of people, right? It tends to be. So sometimes I see Facebook ads, and I saw one that I was like, wow, that's a big claim to make for this person. And I spent a weekend doing a crazy deep dive on it. And the person that they were talking about was super successful in this program, but she would have been successful in any similar program. she already had a huge business. It was like it was a membership site offer. And they just took her digital courses and packaged them as a membership site. She had a huge audience. And this had happened many, many years ago, and they're using it as an example today. So I think also looking at the testimonials people are giving, are they recent? Does that seem replicable? Is it pretty common, whatever is being claimed, for people to have that result? I think that's really important for people to consider when they're being a discerning customer. As you said, in any investment they're making, I agree with you. Uh, If you are going to be a service provider, you need to be a great service provider and great at what you do.
Yeah.
But not everybody in every industry is. So yeah,
Correct.
it's hard.
Yeah. And you can maybe do some work, and then think, hey, I'm going to start a consulting business on that. But doing a consulting business takes some other skills rather than just being like a technician and,
Yes.
delivering a service. Run into that recently that I'm not going to go into.
Communication is important, right?
Communication is very key.
Yes.
Also missing deliverables over and over. Please communicate.
Yes.
Anyways, I would like to talk to you a little bit about, the evolution of your business between, so masterminds, one-on-one coaching. When I first found you, I remember you were doing, you could go online and, book a one-on-one discovery or like a coaching
strategy session.
Yes. Strategy session is what you called them. And then you've kind of changed the model throughout the years. So I know you're a very strategic person, and there's reasons that you're changing the model.
Yes.
So I'd like you to maybe take us a little bit through the evolution of the different services you've provided, in as much detail or as little as you want, but kind of the strategic shifts that you were thinking along the way as you were changing the model.
The beginning was a huge experiment because I didn't know what was going to work, and what my mentors were teaching didn't work for me. So I started just seeing what the people wanted. So what people wanted were, they enjoyed the masterminds, and people needed coaching and strategic coaching in their business. And I found that I could provide a lot of value in a one-time session with someone. And I know now, after understanding the Kolbe, have you ever taken the Kolbe A?
I have. I'm pretty high on the quick start too.
Oh, you are? Are you a 9? I think you might even be a 9, higher than me. Do you know what you are? What number you are?
Oh, no, I'd have to pull it up.
Okay. So it basically is how you operate this, and it's KOLBE, and anyone can go take this assessment it's like $50. And we use it in coaching of our clients. So all of our clients, we pay for them to take this assessment, and we customize our coaching to them based on this assessment, because you either are a fact finder, which is you start a project by understanding the facts, by doing research. You are like systems is the second number. It's called follow through, but it's like you might start things with systems. You and I probably both start things with ideas and brainstorming, and maybe don't think about all the details. And the last one is called implementation, but it's more how you approach things, like if you can handle abstract thinking, or if you need like things really modeled for you. That's my quick understanding of it. As a quick start, I am super amazing at brainstorming ideas for people. And because I have a very extensive business background, I've worked in PR, I've worked in marketing, I've worked at a general contractor in marketing. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad was a civil engineer. There's another business in our family that's in like the 4th generation. It's a cement contracting business. And then I have an MBA, and I worked as a management consultant. So I have a really diverse and like broad and deep background in corporate, in small business, and in lots of different industries. So I found that I added a lot of value to people in just a one-time session. I also some people wanted ongoing coaching, one-on-one coaching. And I found that I was helpful, but the magic I bring initially wears off. So whatever happens in the first month of working with me one-on-one, that can't be replicated ongoing, because I've shared so many ideas, and it's just about making those ideas happen. So I learned all these things over time, but I didn't know them without trying them. So I've tried a lot of different things. I've tried masterminds only. I hosted the main thing I did in my business was hosting masterminds for several years. And I even brought in other coaches to host masterminds at many different levels. I laugh at one of I can't even find this like ad I did once on my podcast where, I mean, there were so many ways to work with me. It was confusing. It was like, if you are at 5 figures, there's this thing. If you're at 6 figures, there's that thing. If you're at multi 6 figures or 7 figures or beyond, there's this thing. And then, or you could work with me one-on-one, or you could work with my team member one-on-one. I was like, oh my gosh, it was or join our free Facebook group, which I no longer have. So that has changed over time. And I've learned the value of having fewer offers and over time specializing to specific, um, to narrowing who I'm working for. So what we're doing and who we're working with has changed over time. What has stayed the same is that I'm been working with women entrepreneurs this entire time. And um, my goal has always been to help them get to the next level in their business and also do it in a way that's profitable.
Yeah.
Which I would think you would be happy about.
Yes. I'm always like, oh, she's talking about profit, not just revenue.
Yeah. And that really came about because I was following all of these people that seemed to be ahead of me, and all they ever mentioned was revenue. And
Mhm.
then I might meet one of their team members, or I might meet someone that had worked with them before would say, yeah, what they didn't say is that they really didn't make anything on that launch because they spent so much money on Facebook ads, on their launch specialist, on affiliate revenue. And at the end of the day, like, people that seem successful were not actually successful.
Mm.
And so I also, during this time, there was a lot of teaching about having a funnel in my world, in like an online business world, where you first needed to have an offer that was like $7 and then like a $27 offer and a 147 offer. And that never sat with me because I didn't know what I was going to offer for like $7 that all these people wanted. And I remember when I started my first high ticket mastermind, and I think it was $1,000 a month, so 12,000 for the year. I had a person go straight from my podcast to a call with me to signing up for that mastermind.
Yeah.
She never was on an email list. She had never spoken to me before. She wasn't in my free Facebook group. None of the things that people had said needed to happen is what happened. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to just start trusting my own intuition
Yeah.
and my own business acumen and rely on what I'm actually seeing happening. And this is one thing I like to teach other people: do more of what's working.
Yes.
So what was working was the podcast to an offer. And of course, I still built an email list because that is important in my world. Not important in everybody's world, but in my world, it is to be able to have that communication channel. And, but yeah, that was like one of those things where I was like, wait a second, no one's talking about this.
You mean there's not one way to do things?
Oh, no, Hannah, there's so many different ways to do things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that. I love that you're like, wait a second, what is actually happening here? How am I and I feel like your marketing channel of the podcast, because you were providing so much value over and over and over again, week in, week out, you could kind of maybe bypass maybe some of those other tricks, I guess, that maybe,
Yeah.
building this funnel and doing that kind of stuff. It almost feels a little, um, I mean, it's a little formulaic, but maybe if you're just totally going from a cold audience to wanting somebody to buy something from you, maybe like that worked for people in the past, but like you were able to bypass that. And not that that is even really working right now. I can't say that it's working. Maybe it's working for some people. Doesn't work for me. But with that, you didn't have to kind of go through that, all that, just blah. I don't know what you call it. Just like all the, it feels, I don't know.
It
To
was
me,
all
it
these
kind of feels,
steps that weren't necessary. And at the end of
yeah,
the day, my clients that wanted to pay $12,000 to work with me for that year, and this is in 2017-ish, I think, might have been 2016, when I did that first high level mastermind. The clients that those clients were not signing up for email lists. They were
Yeah.
not buying $7 offers. They
Yeah.
were 6-figure to multi-6-figure to 7-figure business owners. And so that wasn't even part of what they would even do.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I've really helped people understand, that my clients that I work with, is that those are often those smaller offers or those small price courses or PDFs or checklists or whatever it is you're selling. That's often a DIY person.
Yes.
They're going to do that. They're going to read and learn from you and go implement something themselves. And to try to wait for them to move through this process to eventually be able to pay you a high ticket service or like a retainer, a CFO retainer, that is a different audience. So talking to the right audience through podcasting has been essential for me. So everything I do is strategic. If you watch me, I don't do things for no reason. So currently, I started off when you were listening to the podcast, I was probably doing a lot of interviews of other entrepreneurs. I no longer do that. I only interview my clients, and I either share a success story or do on-air coaching. The way my podcast, I think, really took off and my business took off was when I started doing on-air coaching.
Mm.
So I invite someone on the air and I coach them through whatever issue it is. And I am effectively demonstrating what I do.
Yeah.
And it's very appealing to listen to because it's like, oh my gosh, I get to listen into this coaching session. Even though, we both know it's being aired. I rarely edit anything out unless the client asks, and they never do. So it's truly like what's happening in the moment. And uh, I heard another set of podcasters do this. There's only one other person I saw do this, and they did, and I loved listening to them. And I thought I could do that. I was terrified to do it. I was waiting this is the imposter syndrome I felt and what I had to overcome for a long time. Now it's easy. But the first few I did, I was waiting for coaches to slam me and be like, I can't believe you told her to do that. That was ridiculous advice. That's what I thought I would hear. Instead, what I heard other coaches saying is, I love listening. Sometimes you coach a little differently than I would. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting direction she took. So not once have I, in all these years, has anyone ever messaged me and said, that was terrible advice you gave them, or you should be off the air. Like, no one did that. And so, but that has probably been one of the secret sauces of what I've done in my business, was showing people, because my work is sometimes hard to explain. And some of the things now I can explain it. At the time, I could not explain some of what I was doing. And so it worked for me to show people, and they would be like, I need that too. I'm going to go book a call with her. And then in that 2016, 2017 timeframe, I did strategy sessions with about 100 women each of those years.
Yeah.
Different levels of business, different life phases, some product entrepreneurs, some service providers, some people that wanted to leave corporate and be entrepreneurs. And I learned so much through all of that. And I also learned from them what was working in the marketplace and what wasn't. I also worked with online people that wanted to start a podcast, people that were thinking of doing a YouTube channel, like so many different types of industries and stages of business. And I started to see where I was adding the most value through that. I wasn't able to see that for myself initially.
Yeah. And then that kind of helped you niche down into who you felt and how to serve them best. And then also who is that best fit for you. I know that well, maybe let's back up. What is niching?
Thank
Sometimes,
you.
I mean, people say that, but then it's like, well, what is it really? What is your definition of niching?
So I would start with positioning. So we all need to position our businesses. And if you are a generalist, it is so confusing to everyone in your network that might want to send you business. So you can specialize by the work you do, or niche by who you do it for. or both, which I call a specialized niche. That's my favorite. When you're very narrow. I have a client I'll give an example of a specialized niche. I have a client who we just positioned her business. She does SEO for med spas.
Mm,
So clear. You
yeah.
might even, some people might even be like, I know someone who owns a med spa. They probably
Right.
could use SEO help.
Right.
So that's very specialized she could do a lot of different things. She can redo your website, which she might add on. So there's a lot of things she could do, and she can actually do that for any industry.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talked about what is the best fit for her and what would make her highly referable, that's how we got to that specialized niche. So niche is about the who you're working with, and it could be by industry, it could be by the size of company, it could be by some type of life stage or psychographics. So those are harder. Those are harder. I primarily work with women that are B2B. So they have a small business and they're working with other small business owners, corporations, or nonprofits. So that's that's my clientele that I've figured out that I serve the best. And I've also figured out that I am most effective in a business when they've reached multi 5 figures and taking them to multi 6 figures.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really passionate about women paying themselves 6 figures, 100K.
Yeah.
It takes got to get past 6 figures in revenue. And another level, you have to get to your second 6 figures usually before you can pay yourself 6 figures, unless you're doing it with a very, very tiny team, which I also like to teach people to do. Lean dream team is what I'm into.
Yeah.
So helping people just have enough help so that they're not the only person doing everything in their business, maybe have one other service provider, and then decide if they want to grow from there.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they can just replicate that model. So you can be a specialist in your work and a generalist in who you're serving, or vice versa. But the most referable businesses are both, which is terrifying to do.
Yeah.
It's terrifying our brain tells us that's scary. Do not limit.
Yeah.
Why would you limit who you could work with? And the reason is because people don't know how to send you work when you're a jack of all trades. We really like to refer to people that are experts.
Yeah. I agree with that for sure. I like that you mentioned that you like to do things with a small team, or you encourage people to do with a small team as they get going. I want to ask you a little bit about the structure of your team now.
Sure.
You've kind of changed your business over the years. Like, what kind of support do you have to make all of BizChix happen?
Well, it has changed this year. I don't know if you know this, but I sold part of my business to a team member.
Yes. I saw the announcement on that. So
yes. So I had Shelly Warren had been a client initially and came into my business about 5 years ago. And yes, it was 5 years. And we had tried lots of different things in terms of how the business was structured and what offers we had. And in 2019, I decided to change where we were coaching in the business. So I had been coaching really the highest level entrepreneurs that I was attracting. So multi 6-figure and 7-figure business owners. And then Shelly was coaching the 2 levels below that. So like early 6 figures and 5 figures. And observing our work and the needs of the people at the different levels, I kept wanting to get my hands into the groups she was working in. And I saw when she attended our retreats for this higher level group that what they most needed was team help. They needed help with team and leadership issues and people issues, which is Shelly's where she shines. And so in 2019, I did a very bold thing. I also hosted a conference, which you came at least once.
Yeah,
did you come twice? Once
I
or
came
twice?
Yeah, I
Okay,
didn't make it the first
I thought you were there
year.
twice.
Yeah, I didn't make it the first year, but I was there twice, and it was an incredible conference.
So I hosted a podcast called BizChix Live in 2017, 2018, and 2019. And in 2019, I had this revelation that Shelly and I were coaching in the wrong spots. And we completely changed the programs at that time. So that she was coaching, we called it Leadership Lab. She was coaching this group of people that had a team of 5 or more. And I started 6 Figures Lab, which is a group coaching program to help women get to their first or next 6 figures. Initially, that program in 2019 was for any woman entrepreneur who had multi 5 figures in their business. And that has now, each year, we've really looked at what we're doing and niched it more. So now it is open to women who are marketers, consultants, or financial professionals only. There's a lot of synergy between them, and they actually can refer each other a lot of business. It works out really well, and they have very similar business models behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So the team I have, I'm so fortunate because people tend to stay with me ongoing for a long time. And currently, I have a program assistant. Her name's Alyssa, and she is a full-time employee. And she works in the program Six Figures Lab. And then she also supports me as an executive assistant, essentially.
Nice.
But she's on every call in the program. She wears a lot of hats, and she does very well. And she keeps asking for more hats. So she tends to master something and ask for something new. And she went through mastering her role. She's been with me she's the newest team member. So she's been with me for about 18 months, 20 months ish.
Nice.
And she likes writing. And so she's asked if she could do more writing. So now she's doing our newsletters and my social media posts. We're still like, she's very close to getting my voice exactly. So it's amazing. So and there's so much synergy because she's in the group, she's with the clients, and it's just been working out really well. That's a hidden talent. I would not hire someone that could do all those things.
Right.
That's not what I recommend people do. It happens. She was hired for what she was hired for, but then she's been able to grow her position, which has been great. I have Tiffany Smith, who is she's been with me for, it'll be 5 years. She's been with me for 5 years. It was 5 years this winter. So Tiffany's worked with me for 5 years. She started as my executive assistant part-time, has grown her role. Yes, you know Tiffany. She's grown her role to be my operations lead and was a full-time employee. But when we changed the business structure, when I sold part of my business to Shelly, I sold that profit center that Shelly had been running to her. And Tiffany started her own business. So I'm Tiffany's client, Shelly's Tiffany's client, and Tiffany is open for other clients. So she's amazing at anything to do with operations, tech, connecting things, automations. There's so many Zapier things happening behind the scenes. And so she's just created so many efficiencies through operations in my business, and does it all with like the highest level of care for every single person, whether it's a client, a team member, myself. So that's just incredible.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Cook coaches alongside me in the business, and she started out with us. She's coming up on 5 years in November. She started out as a very part-time community manager in a free Facebook group I had.
Yeah.
Long time ago. And she's grown her position. Then she was like a community manager in a group coaching program that Shelly was running under my business. And now she actually got certified as a coach. And she started out as an accountability coach in the program. I wanted to call her assistant coach, and she wouldn't let me. She's like, I am not a coach. I was like, you are though. So she got certified, and she also is a certified Colby consultant, and she has her own business. So she's a contractor in my business. And she runs many of the calls in the program. So we have 4 calls in our group coaching program. Laser coaching, which I answer, I call it 20 questions. I usually get 20 questions from clients on that call, and I answer them rapid fire in like 90 minutes. So that's super fun for me, works well with my brain. We have another call that's called CEO Workshop, where clients can come on and do some co-working together or watch a training that we have in our training library. Our third call is a mastermind group. So we do every quarter, we match our clients into groups of like 4 to 6 people, and they do a mastermind for a quarter once a month with each other. And it's really about creating connections in the group. And then our last call of the month is goal setting. So we have our clients, you'll be happy about this, review their numbers from their bookkeeper.
Good.
And we have them report them to us. And Tiffany and Alyssa have created an amazing automation. So they fill out a goals form where it shares what their goals are, what their numbers were, what their profit was, how much they paid themselves. We also now have them rate their team. So we know what's happening with their team, and we have them rate their clients. So it gives us a lot of details. It goes into an Airtable. And then we have meetings behind the scenes. So we have meetings where we go over everybody's goals that Alyssa and Elizabeth and I are on. And we look at who's like doing great, who's in like the middle, and then who's struggling that may need some extra support, or we need to reach out to them, or someone set a goal and we're like, is that really what they should be working on? We should ping them and be like, we thought you were focused on this. So there's a lot of behind the scenes happening in that program. So, and then we have a graphic designer that comes in once in a while when we need graphic design, but she's contractor. I have a bookkeeper, of course, and I have a podcast editor.
Of course. Very important. We need those. Thanks for that. I think the team, it's always kind of nice to know like how somebody's structured behind the scenes, because you can see the output, but like actually understanding what goes into it is really helpful.
I guess I should say this year, I tried having a fractional CMO in my business that was helping with writing. And there was a lot of, we were creating some series of emails and redoing some copy, but I got to the point where she was a great conversion copywriter, and we had gotten her Zone of Genius. We had used that. Mm-hmm. And because I have a marketing background as well, and then we had this hidden talent with Alyssa on the team, we weren't needing that level of service. Yeah. And once we split the business as well, once I sold part of that, it just is like, that just is like not needed. And I also hired this year an instructional designer to work with me to create new content into my program. So we did a project. It was about a 3-month project this year where she would interview me and then work with our graphic designer and create a slide deck. So then I would just go back, review it, and then record it. And that helped me create a ton of new content for my clients. And it was very much money well spent for me.
I feel like I'm going to need to find out who that was.
We can talk about it. It was very helpful.
Yeah. Interesting. I know we're running up on time here, but I still have so many questions for you. I'm curious what KPIs or metrics you are focused on in your business right now with the structure that it is.
I have always been focused on podcast downloads. So podcast numbers are important to my business because that is the main marketing tool of my business. That's how I get clients. And so maintaining or growing that is important. Because I have changed who I am talking to over time, I've had times where I've had to understand that my audience is going to decrease for a period of time, and then I will build it back up. So I love looking at those numbers. I'm very aware of my podcast download numbers. They're important to my business and always have been. I see a direct link between those and revenue.
Okay. How often do you check that? Is that a weekly measurement?
It depends how busy I am. I definitely look at them 1 to 2 times a week. Okay. When I was less busy or feeling very obsessed, I might look at them every day. That's not healthy. That's not necessary. Yeah. It's not necessary. But it would be like what I do when I was bored.
Yes.
Revenue is super important to me when I have, so I am a big fan of asking your financial provider to show things in the way you want to see them and the way your brain works. And obviously that needs to make sense to everybody in the room, so to speak. But if I have different programs, I want to see the revenue by program. And then I want to see, overall profitability. We don't assign our time by program. If I really wanted to get granular, if I was bigger, I would want everybody to assign their time by program. We don't do that. Yeah. I have a very good sense of because we're small enough, I don't need that metric. So really, revenue by program, profitability, and expenses are, there's certain numbers I want to see there. And those are kind of what I focus on. But I like to look at I know how to read financial statements. I enjoy looking at them myself. I like spreadsheets. I'm a bit of a nerd. And I understand them and how they work together. So I'm able to, that's why I don't have a CFO in my business, because I have some of that acumen already,
Right.
And my bookkeeper has been able to provide things in a way that the reporting is in a way that I can see it and read it. And we set goals for, um, we set yearly and then look at them quarterly, our goals for each of those programs. So we do that once a year. So she's not a CFO, but she's more than a bookkeeper, I would
Yeah.
say, doing a level above. And I pay for that. And
Yeah.
she uses Fathom, which is a great reporting software that some financial professionals use, and it is able to let us see things in a way that is great for like a business owner, and we can do different graphs and things. But I've watched my numbers for enough years that those are kind of the main things that I look at. I also
Yeah.
look at, in terms of different, so when I hire people to do other things in my business, like I had a CMO, or when I hire this, I don't know if it was worth hiring my instructional designer yet. I will have to see how retention looks. So I'm always looking at number of people in the program and how long they stay in the program.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense because you're wanting to make sure that you have some return on that investment of the labor.
Yeah. And it's a 1-year program. So people join for a year and then they can stay on as an alumni after
Mhm.
that if they'd like to. And many do. So we look at that percentage that stay. I noticed at the end of last year that I'd had several clients that had been in the program over 2 years. And I was like, I knew they were close to leaving. And I loved working with them, and I could tell they needed something more high touch. And that's where I launched this other mastermind, which is a combination of masterminding and more one-on-one with
Mhm.
me. And then we do an in-person retreat.
Yeah.
So that is for women that are at least 6 figures. Most of them are multi 6 figures in that group. And it's a small group.
Yeah.
So that's been really fun to add that back into my life, because I started with masterminding and now bringing it back in. What is different from what I used to do before is it's a hybrid of masterminding and one-on-one coaching together.
Yeah. So more high touch than maybe just a
Yeah.
mastermind.
Yeah.
Well, Natalie, we're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately.
This was so
I feel
fun.
like I could keep talking to you. I do have one last question, but before I
Sure.
ask it, I want to point people to your website. It's bizchix.com. So people
Yes.
can go and check you out there. But my last question is, who are maybe a mentor or mentors in your business over time? And what's like a best piece of advice you've gotten from them, one of
Mm.
them or another, multiple?
I often have mentors that don't know they're my mentor.
Mm,
So one of my favorite people to follow right now is Dan Sullivan. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not.
He has a company called Strategic Coach, and he has been a coach for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I find that so inspirational. And he is one of the few people I have seen who has original ideas. In fact, a friend of mine several years ago, around 2017, actually, we tracked back all these coaches that learned from Dan. They're using his stuff or leading, like referring to him and without referring to him. So many people in the coaching space that have been around for a while have been inspired by Dan, or their coaches have been inspired by Dan. So I always like to get to the source of things.
Yeah.
And he really studied entrepreneurs over time and has over time, and creates frameworks for people to think through things and to view their businesses, which has inspired me to do the same in my business, because I'm the daughter of an engineer and a teacher. So I feel like I'm the best. My brain is the best of both of them. And so while I love teaching and adapting things to individuals, I also like to see things visually and have it be in some type of framework or structure. And so I've been inspired to create models and frameworks in my own business for my clients. And some of them get shared publicly. So I would say he has been extremely inspirational. He has 3 books out. I would recommend any of his books.
Mm,
One is Who, Not How. One is 10X is Easier Than 2X. And the other one is called The Gap and the Gain. And he co-wrote them with a writer called, and another entrepreneur called Benjamin Hardy. So those books are amazing. But I think when I think about all the different things I've learned from listening to Dan's podcast, reading his books, and just following all of his work, is that he says, this is one thing he says often, is that entrepreneurs don't have bad goals. They have bad timelines. So usually, and especially what makes sense to you and I, is quick starts. We think things can happen so much faster than they actually can. And those of us that have been around the online space, there's this like, oh, it can do this 6 figures in a year, 1 million in 3 years. Like, it's not realistic. And that's not how things actually work. So if you're not hitting your goals and you've got coaching around that, you're in the right direction, you're positioned well, then it's just a matter of time. Like, our goals can be met. We just need more time. So that has been really helpful to me when I feel like things aren't happening as fast as I want them to. I'm all for building something that is, as you said at the beginning, an enduring business, enjoyable, profitable, and sustainable. I want people to stay in business. Most people don't make it past 1 year, and then most people don't make it past 5 years. So, and I think that if we have not that the goal has to be realistic, but the timeline has to be realistic. So that's what I've learned from Dan.
I love that. I'm definitely going to check that out. I know I've heard of some of those books before, but I have not read
you will
them,
like all of his books.
I have a feeling I will. Well, thank you for sharing that. Natalie, how else can people get in touch with you?
My podcast is a great way. I mean, you're already listening to a podcast right now. So come on over in your podcast app and search BizChix and I'll come up. So we spell Chicks with an X. And then I'm personally on LinkedIn, and send me a DM, say you heard this episode, and I would love to connect with you. I love talking to people on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.